In the dim, heavy air of January 1968, as the jungles of central Vietnam simmered under a gray sunrise, the pilots of Phu Bai Air Base felt something shifting. It was the kind of shift you feel in your ribs before you understand it in your mind. An instinct, a pressure, a warning. Reports of MiG ambushes were coming in from Da Nang to Pleiku. Experienced Skyraider pilots whispered that the North Vietnamese Air Force had become a phantom. Jets appeared out of cloud banks, out of mountain shadows, out of the rising heat itself. They struck like hawks, fast and silent, then vanished before American radars even registered a threat. On January 26th, just 5 days before the Tet Offensive erupted across the country, that phantom closed its grip on a pilot named Thomas Ridley. Ridley flew an A-1 Skyraider, an old, lumbering attack plane built from bolts, rivets, and a thunderous radial engine that felt more like a tractor heart than a fighter's. He was on a routine escort mission when two MiG-17 dropped out of the morning haze like steel arrows. Ridley rolled hard. The MiGs rolled harder. He dove. They dove faster. When cannon bursts tore through his right wing and oil splashed across his windshield, he knew the fight was over. His aircraft plummeted, trailing smoke, and Ridley barely escaped with his life, tumbling into the green hell below. Hours later, pale and shaking in a rescue chopper, he whispered the sentence that spread like sickness through Phu Bai. They saw me long before I ever saw them. The base mechanics cursed. Pilots nodded grimly. Ground crews stared silently at the horizon where the MiGs had vanished. Everyone understood that nothing they were doing was enough. Jets designed in the 1940s could not outmaneuver enemies trained by Soviet advisors and hardened by years of combat. Ridley's survival was luck. No one expected the next man to be so fortunate. But war is full of strange arrivals. And on the evening of January 30th, as supply helicopters buzzed overhead and distant artillery thumped like a dying heartbeat, a replacement pilot stepped off a transport plane. His name was Jack Collins, 26 years old, tall, quiet, with the posture of someone more used to lifting feed bags than saluting officers. His hands were rough, calloused, built for tools and soil. He'd grown up in a tiny Kansas town no one outside the county could find on a map. He looked nothing like a fighter pilot. Because he wasn't. Collins's childhood had been fields, not playgrounds, coyotes instead of competitions, chores instead of dreams. His father taught him how to track animals, how to fire a shotgun without wasting shells, and most importantly, how to predict movement. Don't aim at the rabbit, his father always said. Aim where it's about to be. Those words carved themselves into Jack's bones long before he ever sat in a cockpit. But farming doesn't stop wars. When Collins failed to get into college, the draft swallowed him whole. He ended up in an A-1 Skyraider training pipeline. The aircraft nobody glamorous wanted, the aircraft built for dangerous, low-altitude missions where speed didn't matter because you had none to begin with. The Skyraider was slow, loud, stubborn, but it was honest, and Collins understood honest machines. When he arrived at Phu Bai, the men barely greeted him. They were too tired, too cynical, too aware that pilots came and went like storms. He was just another name to write on a bunk. Another set of boots that might sit empty tomorrow. Then came January 31st. Tet. All across the South, cities exploded into chaos. Hue burned. Saigon shook under rockets. Phu Bai sounded the alarm, and scrambled aircraft punched into the sky in frantic waves. Collins, on only his third mission, found himself airborne beside Captain Ed Conley, a veteran with stress lines carved so deep they looked permanent. Stick close, Conley barked. MiGs love this valley. They climbed, turned, scanned, and then Collins saw them. For MiG-17s slicing in from the east, angled low, weapons cold, waiting for the perfect ambush. But Collins didn't see aircraft. He saw coyotes. He recognized the hunting formation from the fields he had walked since childhood, the pattern predators used to isolate and corner prey. The MiGs weren't hunting him. They were setting up for Conley. Doctrine said Skyraiders should dive away the moment MiGs appeared. But Doctrine didn't live on a farm. Collins rolled toward a patch of empty sky, squeezed the trigger, and sent 4.50 caliber machine guns roaring at nothing. 2 seconds later, a MiG flew directly into that stream of fire. It disintegrated in a fireball. Conley gasped. Someone screamed into the radio. The remaining MiGs whipped around and targeted Collins with furious precision. They came fast, furious, claws out. But Collins wasn't thinking like a pilot. He was thinking like a hunter. He read their momentum, their angle, their hunger. He knew exactly where they would turn, and when they committed, too tightly, too eagerly, he put his Skyraider into a brutal, groaning arc and fired again. The second MiG exploded into fragments. The radio fell silent. Then a whisper. The farmer knows something. The news of Collins's impossible victory swept across Fu by like a shockwave. A Skyraider, one of the slowest combat aircraft in the entire theater, had downed 2 MiG-17s in a single engagement. Ground crews stared at him like he had grown wings. Helicopter pilots brought him warm beer and slapped his shoulders. Captain Conley simply stood in front of him, eyes narrowed, as if studying a new animal no one had classified yet. "You're not flying that plane," Conley finally said. "You're hunting with it." But North Vietnam heard the story too. Their radio interceptors flagged the call sign, Hayseed, the mocking nickname Collins's squadron had given him on day one. The elite MiG group known as the Red Falcons, the same squadron that had ambushed Ridley earlier, was tasked with identifying and eliminating this unpredictable American. Because Collins wasn't just killing MiGs. He was breaking their doctrine. Over the next week, the battle for Hue consumed everything. The ancient citadel turned into a maze of gunfire and shattered stone. Marines fought house to house, room to room, pushing through smoke and screams. Above them, A-1 Skyraiders flew tirelessly, dropping ordnance within meters of friendly forces, their wings blackened with soot and grime. Collins flew constantly. Dawn missions, dusk missions, emergency support calls in the dead of night. His uniform never fully dried. His throat stayed raw. His vision blurred from gunpowder residue. But with each flight, his strange instinct sharpened. He could feel the MiGs before he saw them. He sensed when they were nearby, as if the air itself grew tense. And when they attacked, he reacted with something beyond training. He reacted with memory. Coyotes circling livestock. Hawks stooping on field mice. Rabbits juking left at the last second. His childhood wasn't a metaphor. It was a manual. And in a sky full of men taught to obey doctrine, he was the lone pilot treating combat like an animal hunt. By February 10th, Collins had 4 confirmed kills. Not a single one achieved by chasing an enemy. Every shot was a deflection shot, fired not at the enemy aircraft, but at the future position the enemy had unknowingly committed to. Other Skyraider pilots tried it. None could make it work. They didn't see what he saw. The enemy did. The Red Falcons grew increasingly enraged. Their flight briefings began including diagrams of Collins's engagements. They studied the angles, the timing, the impossible precision. Soviet advisors in Hanoi concluded that Collins was highly trained in predictive gunnery. They were wrong. He was trained in cornfields. On February 14th, the Falcons made their move. 4 MiG-17s attacked Collins's flight south of a Shao Valley. They came low and quiet, using mountain ridges to mask their approach. The first burst hit Collins's Skyraider square in the oil system. Black smoke spewed from the engine. The aircraft bucked and coughed. Conley screamed for him to bail out. But Collins wasn't about to be hunted on the ground. He kept the nose level, kept the wings steady, and coaxed the dying engine along, whispering to it like a wounded animal. The MiGs dove in again, but this time other Skyraiders blocked their passes, giving Collins room to limp away. His plane barely held altitude. Jungle treetops brushed his landing gear. When his engine seized completely, he belly landed in a patch of rice paddy barely long enough to fit the wingspan. Marines sprinted to him as the aircraft skidded and twisted through mud. They yanked the canopy open to find Collins drenched in sweat, breathing hard, eyes blazing with something feral. "You okay, Hayseed?" a Marine asked. Collins nodded once and said, "I can still fly another." But he couldn't, not that day. He was dehydrated. His muscles twitched involuntarily from exhaustion. They forced him into a helicopter, flew him back to Fubai, and strapped him to a cot in the medical tent. The doctors grounded him for 48 hours. He lasted 24. The next morning, barefoot and still in a hospital gown, he walked across the tarmac toward his Skyraider like a man in a trance. Conley caught up to him and blocked the ladder. "You're going to kill yourself?" Conley said. Collins shrugged. "Then I'll die working." Conley stared at him. realization dawning. Collins wasn't fearless. He wasn't crazy. He was locked in. The instincts that made him a hunter didn't turn off when he landed. They kept spinning, coiling, tightening. The only place he felt right was in the sky. So Conley let him climb into the cockpit. On February 23rd, Collins returned to the air and flew straight into the largest aerial battle of his life. That afternoon, as the sun turned the haze orange, nearly 24 American and South Vietnamese aircraft clashed with a wave of MiGs near the outskirts of Hue. Tracer fire laced the air. Rockets screamed. Black plumes from burning planes twisted upward like smoke from funeral pyres. In the middle of the chaos, Collins heard a voice he recognized. Calm, cold, precise. Captain Tran Duc Minh, ace of the Red Falcons, the hunter who had ambushed Ridley, the man North Vietnam trusted above all to break the American pilots. Hayseed, Minh said on the radio in accented English. I have been waiting. Collins felt his heartbeat slow. This wasn't a coyote. This was a wolf. Minh didn't attack immediately. He circled, probing, studying, waiting for a mistake. Collins understood instantly. Minh was not like the others. His movements were disciplined, deliberate, a predator that knew the cost of overcommitting. If Collins flew like he normally did, Minh would shred him. So he changed everything. Instead of climbing or weaving, Collins dropped low, dangerously low, skimming treetops so close that branches snapped off beneath his wings. He cut speed just enough to appear wounded, struggling, vulnerable. It was bait. Minh took it. The MiG dove, committing at last to the kill line. Collins felt the shift, the moment the predator could no longer change direction. The moment instinct became trap. He pulled the Skyraider into a brutal climbing turn. The G-force crushed his chest, darkened his vision, but his guns lined up with a patch of open air. He fired. Minh's MiG erupted in a violent fireball, pieces spiraling away like burning confetti. A wing tumbled past Collins's canopy, close enough for him to see the North Vietnamese insignia before it vanished into the trees below. The radio exploded with cheers. American pilots shouted his name. Someone yelled, Hayseed just took out the Red Wolves Alpha. But Collins didn't cheer. He only breathed out slowly, the way farmers do after downing a predator stalking their livestock. He had survived the wolf, but he knew the hunt wasn't over. Not for him. By the time the fires of Hue began to cool, Jack Collins had become a legend whispered in tents, radio rooms, and makeshift bunkers across central Vietnam. 7 confirmed MiG kills, all achieved in one of the slowest combat aircraft still flying. Pilots compared him to a ghost. Infantrymen said they heard stories of a farm boy who could predict the future. Even seasoned helicopter crews, men who had seen everything from ambushes to engine fires, stopped talking when Collins walked by, as if unsure whether he was entirely human. But legends burn fast, and the cost of Collins's brilliance was chewing through him like rust. He slept only in shallow bursts, waking drenched in sweat from dreams of silver wings cutting through gray skies. His hands trembled when he wasn't in the cockpit. His eyes twitched at sudden noises, trained by instinct to search for predators even on the ground. His survival was no longer a matter of strength or discipline. It was momentum, a wild force carrying him forward even as his mind tried to slow down. The doctors at Phu Bai pressured Conley to ground him permanently. Conley refused. If I pull him, Conley said, the MiGs win. But even he could see the change. Collins no longer joked, barely spoke. He ate less, drank more coffee, and spent long hours sitting alone beside the aircraft parking line, staring at the horizon as if reading invisible signs. The enemy noticed the change too. North Vietnamese pilots reported that Collins's flying had become erratic, still deadly, but sharper, harsher, driven not by instinct alone, but by something deeper and more dangerous, obsession. They knew he would burn himself out eventually. They simply had to wait. The waiting ended on March 3, 1968. That morning, U.S. Marines launched a counter-assault on the western flank of Hue. Heavy casualties were expected. Skyraiders were ordered to support the ground troops, attacking fortified enemy positions dug into the hills and riverbanks. Collins, running on 2 hours of sleep and a cup of bitter coffee, strapped into his Skyraider without hesitation. The takeoff felt wrong. The aircraft lurched. The engine's rhythm sounded uneven. But Collins understood his machine like a farmer understands a tractor with personality. Every cough, every shudder, every quirk. He tapped the throttle twice, adjusted mixture flow, and the engine settled. The radio crackled. Hayseed. Enemy aircraft are circling near the Perfume River. Collins's mouth tightened. He knew who it would be. After Min's death, the Red Falcons had reorganized under a younger, hotter-headed leader named Captain Vong Lo. Vong had vowed to avenge Min. Vietnamese propaganda called it settling the sky. And if Vong was flying today, he would not settle for anything less than Collins's death. Within minutes of entering the battle space, Collins saw them. 3 MiG-17 glinting like shards of broken mirrors against the morning sun. They flew in a loose V formation, an unusual shape that immediately told Collins these were not ordinary pilots. They were adapting, learning, copying him. But Collins wasn't the boy who landed at Phu in January. He had changed as much as they had. The MiG swooped low. Collins banked right, staying close to the terrain. Anti-aircraft guns flashed from the jungle below. Tracer rounds arced toward him. He felt the Skyraider tremble under the stress. The G-forces pressed into his ribs like heavy stones. But his mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. The lead MiG began a descending turn, a false move, a lure, a trick, and it worked. 2 American F-100s took the bait, diving straight into Vong's trap. The MiGs snapped upward, shredded the slower jets with precise bursts, and disappeared into a cloud bank. Collins didn't flinch. He had expected it. He leveled out, scanning, waiting, listening for the quiet shift in the rhythm of the battle that always came before a kill. Then he felt it, the pressure in his chest, the stillness of air, the instinct that had saved him since the first day he flew into combat. Vong came from behind. The MiG dropped like a hawk from the top of a thermal. Collins rolled left, then dove toward the riverbank. The MiG stayed glued to him. Cannon flashes lit the sky around his tail. The Skyraider shook as metal tore away from its fuselage. Collins gritted his teeth. He had one chance. One. And it required a move no sane pilot would attempt. He throttled back. The Skyraider slowed violently, almost catastrophically. Vong overshot. In that half-second of hesitation, that single moment when predator became prey, Collins pulled the nose up and fired a perfect deflection burst into the MiG's path. But Vong Lu was no novice. He jerked away a split second before the bullets reached him. The burst missed. And Collins realized something chilling. Vong understood him. The battle tore across the sky. Collins dove through valleys, skimmed treetops, banked so hard his vision tunneled. Vong stayed close, relentless, mirroring his every move. The other MiGs joined the chase, turning the skies over Hue into a deadly whirlpool. The noise of battle below blurred with the shriek of engines and the cough of heavy guns. Minutes passed, then more. Collins's fuel gauge dropped. His ammunition thinned. His body screamed in pain. Vong, sensing the weakness, tightened the noose. The MiGs formed a pincer, boxing Collins toward a narrow stretch of river where escape was impossible. Conley's voice broke through the static. "Jack, bail out. That's an order." Collins didn't reply. He wasn't thinking about orders. He was thinking about coyotes. When a coyote pack boxed in a wounded animal, it always made the same mistake. The final lunge was too confident, too heavy, too complete. It committed everything. Collins waited. And there it was. Vong dropped into the kill line, guns hot, certain the Skyraider could no longer evade. Collins didn't evade. He didn't turn. He didn't dive. He flew straight. At the last possible moment, he slammed the throttle forward, yanked the stick left, and rolled under Vong's guns. An impossible maneuver for a Skyraider, one that tore pain through his chest and made the wings cry out in protest. But it brought Vong exactly where Collins wanted him. Into the future. Collins fired. This time the burst hit home. The MiG erupted in a plume of fire. Vong Li's aircraft spiraled downward, trailing black smoke, vanishing into the trees below with a sound like distant thunder. The remaining MiGs broke off instantly. But Collins's fuel was gone. His engine coughed, sputtered, and died. He glided the Skyraider toward a stretch of mud near the riverbank. The aircraft hit the ground hard, skidding, bouncing, tearing through reeds and water before finally coming to a violent stop. Marines rushed to him. They ripped open the canopy to find Collins barely conscious, blood on his forehead, breath ragged. "Jack, can you hear me?" He opened his eyes, smiled faintly. Rabbit turned left, he whispered. Then he passed out. He survived, but his flying days were over. The injuries, the exhaustion, the mental strain, everything had finally caught up with him. After weeks of treatment, he was sent home, quietly, without ceremony, without the parades or medals that followed other aces. He returned to Kansas, to the fields, to the soil, to the simple life he never fully left behind. For decades, almost no one knew what he had done. His name faded from official reports. His victories were credited to his squadron as a whole. History forgot him, but the pilots who flew with him didn't. The Marines he saved didn't. The men who watched him break the doctrine of North Vietnam's best fighters never forgot the farm boy who saw the sky like a living thing. Jack Collins died in 2004, buried on the very land where he learned to read the wind and predict the motion of animals. His tombstone was simple, just his name, birth and death dates, and the words, "He always aimed ahead." Because in a war built on technology and theory, one quiet farmer taught the world that instinct, raw, simple, human instinct, could reshape the sky. And sometimes, the deadliest pilot in the world is the one who never wanted to be one at all.